I've never seen a diamond in the flesh. I cut my teeth on wedding rings.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
Man, that is a sad clown.
Dude, that's pretty good.
This is The Gloom, bringing you weekly interviews with F3 Omaha packs, exploring their F3 experiences and finding those sticky elements that create the glue in the gloom.
Shout out to our sponsors Major Team Mortgage, Omaha Laser Dentistry, Exclusively Eye Care, and Liberty Core Real Estate. We appreciate their support. Now let's get back to the gloom.
Hey, are you the type of guy that likes to get up early in the winter to battle your jester? Do you love listening to people drone on and on and on about COVID in the gloom? Would you trust your vision to a guy nicknamed Cataracts? Well, if the answer to any of these questions is yes, fellas, you have bigger problems than you think. Dr. Cataracts, aka Dr. Wolf, can't solve all of your problems, but he can certainly help you solve the problems related to your eye health and vision. You will find many F3 principles throughout his practice. Check him out today at Exclusively Eye Care. And we're back. We've been waiting for this one. I'm excited for this guy. I actually just got to talk to him on the phone the other night because he was all jazzed up about a third F idea. I've had many conversations with this guy in the gloom. Got to share some conversation and some letters through the F3 Impact Retreat. And I've just had a blast watching this guy lead, not only in our group, but just hearing about him leading his family, leading in the community. And so Ketchup is who I've got on today. And man, you look good. Are you growing this beard out for the winter time?
I probably should have shaved before this. I don't know. I'm going to be doing this the whole time. It's a little bushy, but
yeah, it looks good, man. Well, it's super excited to just hear your story and give you a chance to tell it for guys. But where we'd like to start off is kind of that first workout, who EH'd you. I don't know if you remember who was queuing or what the workout was like, but would love any details there. And then tell us how you got your name.
Yeah. So as far as F3 Omaha goes, is not traditional. So Brad Pitt actually EH'd me. So in 2020 during COVID, I had like 3 surgeries. So I tore my bicep at the end of 19, had a surgery to get it repaired. And then about, 2 weeks after my surgery, I fell in my garage and I landed on my arm and it pulled out everything that they had done. So I had to go back in again and have it redone. And part of the reason I fell is I had an ankle that was just all sorts of jacked up and it gave out, and that's what caused me to fall. And so we were sitting at home, didn't do anything. And so I went in and got my ankle checked out and there was nothing holding it together. So I had it basically reconstructed. And so in the course of these 3 surgeries I had in between February and October of 2020, Brad Pitt and my mom would come up and they would basically just help out. Cause like when I had my ankle surgery, I couldn't walk for 6 weeks. And so when he was up, I committed, he'd been doing F3 for a couple years and he'd come up to Omaha. I mean, he knew who Vandalay was. I mean, he'd gone out, there were people in Omaha that knew him and he lives in, Atlanta, Georgia. Mm-hmm. So he kept gigging me, when are you going to get out? So finally I said, all right, fine. You've come up here. You're helping me, put me back together. I will commit to one workout when we come down and see you at Christmas time. So my first official F3 workout was part of F3 Cherokee. And it was a ruck. And so we showed up and it was an hour and, I got through that. And at that point, I had not done anything physical for the better part of a decade and a half. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, this ain't that bad. It'll be fine. And so then I go the next morning again and just completely got my ass kicked. Like it was one of those where you can't even sit down on the toilet for 3 days without just like trying to hold on to stuff. It was so bad.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell you who was queuing down there. I couldn't tell you. I don't remember any of it. I just remember the first one was kind of I didn't think it was a big deal. And the second one, I was rudely, it was a rude awakening is what I would say. So we get through Christmas, we come back and I want to say it was January. It was like the first week of January. I remember thinking, all right, if I'm going to do this, I need to just commit to this. Because if I don't keep doing it, or if I say I'm going to wait till it warms up, I'm never going to get back out there.
Right.
And so I committed to, I think it was January. It was either January 6th or January 9th. It was Wild Kingdom. It was a Tuesday, and Mufasa was on the queue, and he had us running through the snow in some weird Rocky, like versus the Russians thing, like from that. I think it was Rocky 5 or whatever it was, Rocky 4. And I just remember thinking, this is I will never forget that. He was the guy that first guy that led a workout, and it was at Wild Kingdom, which I live like a half mile from the site. So it was an easy transition for me. And I think that first round, I think I committed to 3 days. So like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday was kind of it. So yeah, Mufasa, and it was Wild Kingdom, and we were running through the snow. And it sounds stupid, but I was just kind of hooked. It just kind of went from there. So I got my name because I do competition barbecue and competition steak cooking. And so I threw that out there. I mean, there are so many other things I could have said, but that's what I did say. And so then who doesn't like ketchup on a good steak is kind of how it came out to be. So ketchup is what stuck. And then the closing, whatever, the whole like thing, that was a khakis thing that he added probably, I think it was a month or two after I started posting. And initially I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I remember one beat down at Top Rope, he did it. And I looked at him like, you got to knock that shit off. And he kind of did one of these and stopped. And then later I went back. I'm like, it's just kind of one of those that you just kind of got to own it. So I went back to him and, apologized for kind of losing my cool a little bit. And then it's kind of stuck from there. So that's been kind of the progression. I wasn't, and it made for honestly a weird transition into Omaha because I wasn't EH'd here. I wasn't named here. I showed up at this site. Everybody thought that I knew what the hell I was doing, which was so far from the truth. So I didn't have that kind of traditional kind of new guy FNG experience that you have as you enter a region. So
yeah. Did you get named down in Cherokee?
Yeah. So I could have asked for a new name when I got up here, and nobody would have been the wiser. But I stuck with what I was given.
So then, did Brad Pitt post with you here for your first post in Omaha?
No, because they were. I mean, it was like we were there for Christmas and New Year's, and so we got back home. And they were still down there. So yeah, I just kind of showed up on my own. So
okay,
yeah.
And for people that don't know, what's the connection with
Brad
you?
Pitt is my stepdad. He's not my father-in-law. Everybody thinks he's my father-in-law. He's my stepdad. Yeah.
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 And is he 70? He's 60.
67, 66. He'll be 67 this year. He's 66 right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we could all be his level of fitness when we're 67.
Well, and honestly, growing up because I lived with them through like 7th grade before I moved back to live with my dad, and where they live in Georgia, he had to leave early to get to work at a reason, like to make the travel time reasonable. So if he left any later than 5:30 in the morning, it would turn into a 45-minute to hour-long commute. But if he left before 5:30, he'd get there in 20 minutes. So they've lived there for 25 years, almost, maybe 30. I'm not kidding you. Every day he's up 5 o'clock. He went and worked out at their corporate headquarters because he worked for Kimberly-Clark. He'd work out from 5:30 to 6:30, get dressed, and go to work. And that's just as far as a model of consistency. Like I don't know anybody else quite like him. So
yeah,
because
he's pretty cool.
In shape than I think half the people we have in F3 Omaha. To be honest with you, he's a beast.
Yeah, that's pretty cool to have somebody in your family that's doing F3 with you. Yeah. So, man, and I guess I'm sure you mentioned it and maybe I forgot, but all the injuries and sort of stuff you had leading up to your time in F3. I mean, what's been your progression from a first F perspective? How are you doing today?
Doing well. I haven't had like the weight loss like a lot of guys have. I haven't. I mean, but admittedly, I haven't changed my diet that much either. But from a fitness standpoint, I've for a long time been on blood pressure medicine. I was getting to a point where my annual like physical stuff, my cholesterol was starting to go up. As of last year, cholesterol is where it needs to be and the blood pressure is where it needs to be, which is awesome. From that standpoint, it's been great. And it's just, I will say, when I first started, work was, from a mental health standpoint, honest to God, that's where I've seen the biggest impact. Physical health's been great. Yeah, I can run more than I've been able to for a long time. when I had my ankle surgery, it's honestly probably getting in when I did was probably a good thing because it kind of rehabbed it and it's stronger than it would have been otherwise. So that's great.
Yeah.
Like I said, I haven't experienced a lot of the weight loss that a lot of guys have. But just like mentally, I mean, from my standpoint, there's a lot of, you're one of the guys you can run and talk. Running and talking is not something that I can physically do. So, the analogy I use is I'm so focused on trying to not throw up in the bushes that you can't think about anything else. And so it truly is the only part of the day where you're focused on one thing and that's it, and everything else disappears. And it's a break. And 21 professionally into 22 was a bit of a struggle for me, and just stuff going on at work. And so carrying a lot of stress. And so it allowed me just to uncouple from that, even for that short amount of time. And it just kind of sets you up for the day a little bit better than otherwise. Cause I noticed a difference on the days I'd post and the days I would not post, just mentally where I'd be at. That's honestly where I've seen the most impact from my standpoint.
Yeah, I love it. I would totally agree. And I think a lot of guys are right there with you. I am curious, have you found yourself like rucking, right? That was your first experience. So do you still like to ruck, or have you transitioned to running, or what have you found?
It kind of goes in spurts. Honestly, I'll start pre-running usually about this time of the year because I know the CSOP's coming and I got to get through a 6 or 7 miler. And so I need to kind of get some stamina built up. I hurt my back doing some coupon stuff here this last summer, so I've kind of backed off the rucking. But I've got a shield lock with a couple of guys, and that's what we've started to do. Is we'll pre-ruck before a beatdown, and then we'll actually do the beatdown. That's been going on now for a couple months. But I'll be honest with you, I have not been a pre person. I would say consistently. I kind of go in fits, and it always seems like the winter months are the ones where I tend to give more effort, which seems stupid. It's the worst time of year to get out early, but that's just for whatever reason. That's kind of how my cycle's been. It's usually November, December, January, February. It's just getting out and running or rucking it. That just seems to be when I do it. I don't know.
Yeah. What, you mentioned that you feel like you haven't lost the weight that other guys have. Have you done queen service or anything like that? Or I guess, is weight loss a goal for you? I mean, it seems like
it definitely is. Cause I've got, again, I can't, if I'm carrying this kind of weight when I'm 50, it's not going to be great. So yeah, no, it is. And I did do queen service. And at one point I think I was down like 20 some pounds, but again, that was on a very specific diet that was probably not sustainable. So that's where for me, I think some guys, I'm going to throw out T claps to tea party. Like that guy is half the man that he was when he started. And I still remember him coming to Dragon's Lair and watching how he's progressed. Like, I'll be honest, there's some jealousy. I'm like, what the, like, why hasn't that happened to me? Now, I don't know what other personal choices he's made in his lifestyle change, but for me, it's the diet side, because I don't drink a lot of alcohol. It's not that really. It's the food for me. It's kind of the issue. So I don't know. I just haven't had the weight loss.
Yeah, it's tough. Is it tough? I guess because some of your hobbies are around, but I don't know. Make it, doing if it's meat, right? That's supposed to be good for you.
Competitive cooking doesn't necessarily align itself. A good cook is not generally a skinny cook. So yeah, it's when you do that kind of stuff, it doesn't really align itself well with losing weight. So no, and I will say I've been having the last couple of years, we've been having some pretty pointed conversations with my doctor every year when I go in for my physical, and we're starting to make changes. But again, I've been doing it. I think January will be my 3-year anniversary in F3, and it's taken me 2 years to really get to a point where it's like, mentally, it's because the other thing I did too because I used to chew tobacco. So I've chewed from when I was 18. 2 years ago, I stopped with tobacco and I switched to nicotine. So all I'm doing are the packets now. So there's none of the tobacco side of it. But it's like mentally getting to a place where you're like, I'm putting all this effort and energy into something. I'm doing stuff that's hard and honestly kind of dumb, getting out in 10-degree weather, running around in the snow. But yet all of that effort, I'm just kind of wasting because I'm not willing to make changes in these other facets of my life. So it's just taken me kind of 2 years to get there. But we're getting there. So
yeah. Well, for sure, and I think that's a good point, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint, and I think I mean, I've been trying to out king my queen for 5 years at least, and I will say I've been the same weight for the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
I've lost a little bit of my face maybe, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It is a struggle, and the diet, I would agree, it's the hardest part. And you mentioned a word there, sustainable, right? Is like
Mhm.
I've done some crazy diet things where I've cut carbs to 30 grams a day, but that's not
No.
sustainable,
And
for
that's
any.
honestly, that's where I've had the most success, is that low carb diet. And it's been very successful. But again,
Mhm.
you do it much past 6 months, it's hard to keep it going. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I think that's good, and I'm sure there's a lot of guys listening that would have a similar struggle with that. So, I guess when I'm thinking about that piece too, and the Queen Service and the Shield Lock, talk to me a little bit about that second F kind of fellowship piece and how that has been helpful for you over the years.
yeah, this summer when I was still Site Q, that was something I was hammering on the new guys that would show up. Is when I first started, and I'll use Wild Kingdom as an example because people are familiar with it. Like I couldn't run from the boat ramp back to the flags. Like I just physically couldn't make it. I remember that, and honestly, it was that first queue with Mufasa. Wait time walked with me, and
Mm.
it's just that's a moment that just you'll never forget. Um, and so because of that, in my head, I got it that I wasn't good enough to go sit and have coffee with these guys. Like
Mm.
if I can't keep up, and people have to walk with me, and then we did. I think it was about a month later, wait time queued out there, and we did this hill on the dam. It was 11s on the dam, and khakis just basically dragged my ass up and down that hill. We would run for 10 seconds and walk for 10, and run for 10 and walk for 10. And it's again one of those moments where you're just like you feel bad because these
Mhm.
guys are like giving up their workout and they don't want to be doing it because come on, get your ass in gear and get in shape. And so for a while, it was probably 6 months before I started going to coffee, and I realized how much I missed out on by not going. um, and it's even if everybody knows fine print, one of his comments, he goes, honestly, I just show up for the coffee, the workout is what it is.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know? But it's getting the guy, just talking to people, figuring out who they are, what they are. Because it's hard to get that when you're just sweating and not talking and really communicating, and especially when you have big groups, you can't have those conversations. And finding out, like you said, these questions: how'd you get your name, where are you from, why are you doing this? You tend to kind of be, you just get to know guys better. And that's everybody has said it: you show up for the fitness, you stay for the fellowship. I mean, that it is absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Yeah. How did you overcome then that feeling of like, I'm not worthy for coffee, and then like what was that first coffee like for you?
I think it was just getting comfortable with people. So it's like, and it was for me, it was just more time. And even today, physically, I'm still towards the back of the pack, but I I think it's more of, I stopped comparing myself to where like you would be. Like if you and I were running against each other or we're in some sort of burpee challenge, I'm not going to be able to keep up with you. But it's also, I'm asking an elephant to quack. Like
Hmm.
my objective is, where was I yesterday? And once mentally I kind of shifted or that changed, that for me it was like all that crap that went along with I'm not good enough went out the window. And frankly, I don't care. It was
Yeah.
like I'm doing what I can do. I know I can see myself improving. I can see myself getting better, and therefore, in my mind, I'm qualified to go to coffee. So
Yeah. So you versus you sort
yeah,
of mentality.
yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's key. It's interesting because I do crazy stuff because I'm an addict and I do crazy stuff, but I don't do, my intent is certainly not ever to make anybody feel,
Yeah, and it's never
any
been
sort
that.
of way.
I'll use. I've talked to DeVito quite a bit. He's a newer guy that's been coming out, and
Yeah.
he's a bigger guy. And there was a day we were out at Iditarod, and Mufasa was queuing again. Somehow I don't know why I keep going to his cues, but they ran 3.5 miles, and I ended up staying back with DeVito, and he was making some comments about I just can't keep up with these guys. And afterwards I texted him like, dude, you can't expect to keep up with these guys. if you hold yourself to that level of expectation, you're going to fail and you're going to get down on yourself. You can't do it. Where were you yesterday? And I think after he had his VQ here a month or so ago, and he texted me afterwards, and he goes, "I actually used that in my COT," which was super humbling to hear. It was
That's
awesome.
cool.
But it's that mentality shift, and it isn't. But people have to get there too. I mean, it's I there's certainly, I'm not carrying any of that expectation or pressure when I'm working out with new guys, but they also have to accept that I'm not holding anything against them. And that would, let's say we walk for an entire workout, that's perfectly fine. We're here to support each other and keep moving forward. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that. I think that's great. And I think it even goes for like, if a guy shows up and he thinks the workout's not hard enough,
Yeah.
like similar mentality, right? You versus you, modify and make it harder then,
Yeah,
right? I mean, like you
exactly.
can always, do both sides of that. And that's, I think is so beautiful. And DeVito, man, what an inspiration to just see him coming out, and continuing to come back. I think Gator said this the other day, but he said like, most of us, and some people do this, but most of the time, like you don't drink before you go to the bar, right? You go to the bar to drink.
That's right.
So similar, like you
Right.
don't, get fit and then come to F3, you go to F3 to get fit, and that stuck with me. But so I'm curious from a second F perspective too. I feel like, and I have this vivid memory of you at your first Q source, and I can't remember what we were talking about. It was like 2.0s or something to do with the concentrica. And I just remember you were like, I don't really know what this is, but I'm interested, and you had a lot of questions, and we're just engaged, and would be curious what's been your experience with Q source or some of those other second F pieces.
Yeah, no, Q source has been good. It's just where I've gone typically on days where I go, just they don't typically have Q source. That being said, the ones that I participated in, I've always gotten something out of it. Um, I mean, people will joke around that F3 is a cult, which by definition it is, but nothing negative has ever come out of it ever. Like, I mean, you can sit there. I mean, I've seen some of the Twitter feuds between different regions on, I don't want somebody to tell me how to live my life, and I don't want all this guidance. I'm like, is the guidance really that bad though? Like, they're not telling you to go out and kidnap children and burn houses down. It's trying to help you be a better person. And I've read probably half of Q source. I haven't gotten all the way through it. But I like those types of environments where guys will, show some vulnerability and open up. And sometimes when you see a guy who's close, it's kind of fun to kind of nudge him and kind of get him to maybe break out a little bit. Like I just like that stuff. It's been, as far as like the second F stuff, where this last year, I've really tried to make a point to, text, call, a lot of the new guys, some of the guys that were where I was when I started 3 years ago, because I remember what people did for me. I'm trying to pay that forward. There was when I took the flags at Wild Kingdom, I made a comment. It's F3 needs the 6 as much as the 6 needs F3. Having guys show some humility and slow down and help the guy next to him is almost forcing them into those situations is almost as important in my mind as those guys that need the help getting it. And so that's what I've tried to focus on. One guy that he's been coming here lately who's been crushing is Minnow. He's a respect guy, super great guy. He's just all in, and and you could tell there's been some times where he's struggled, and you kind of hang back with him, and you get a text message him or a note from him the next day saying, "Hey man, I really appreciate that." So you made an impact. And Hazel Rocket's the same way. He had his VQ last week, and there was a day we were up on the dam at Wild Kingdom, and I did what Khakis did for me. He couldn't run, so we did 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off, and we got back to the flags. So for me, it's trying to pay that forward for the guys that were doing it for me previously, because I know what kind of impact it had on me.
Yeah, well, I totally agree, because if we're trying to build male community leadership, there's so much leadership to be learned in that act of humbling yourself and going to be shoulder to shoulder next to somebody that needs help, because it takes a lot of humility for the guy to show up and acknowledge that he needs the help, right? So like on both sides of that, I think I remember sort of this moment in my journey with F3 where it's like, okay, if I'm not willing to go and pick up the 6, then I'm not leading well.
Yeah.
Like it's just not leadership if my choice is to always selfishly prioritize my,
Yeah.
because you just, I don't know. I think it's just so key. Like you said, we need the 6. Like if we didn't have the 6, then we're just a bunch of bat flippers that are, and,
No,
and that's not what the world needs.
we're basically CrossFit is what we are. So
Yeah.
at that
Yep.
point.
Yep.
So,
For
and
sure.
you look across the West Sector region, and this is not to cut anybody else out from Sarpy or DC or any of that. So if I don't say names, don't take it personal. But I mean, you look across the board at guys like, Escobar and Grizz and Hard Hat and yourself. And I mean, these are people that set the example. It's like they're guys that, maybe one of them does better in another area, but it's like if you in aggregate you put everybody together, everybody kind of fills blind spots where
Yeah.
Escobar may be really really good at this, but Grizz is really really good at this, and you put them together and you've got a complete package. And it's just the complete lack of ego. That is the one thing that I have seen in this region, because I've gone down range in a couple others. There is honestly the guys that come into this with ego, they don't tend to last, and
Right.
that for me has been pretty awesome. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's pretty special. It's cool to just be a part of and to just watch and like experience. You're like, it's certainly not my experience in the corporate world.
No, it's not. Yeah,
Totally different.
yeah.
Well, I am curious too, because some of the other like relationships, right? So Q Source talks about the concentrica, and
Mm-hmm.
certainly when we're coming into F3, we go through a lot of changes. Curious what, if you've noticed any impact on your relationship with maybe your M or with your 2.0s or some of those other key relationships since you've been in F3, any positive impact there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm definitely a work in progress with my, personal relationships for sure. I think that's kind of a never ending thing.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely has made me be more aware, and keep them in the forefront and try and find that balance, between what's important and what's not important. I think prior to F3, and I don't know if it was entirely F3 or if COVID had a little bit to do with it, but when I came into, we're coming out of COVID, and how we ran our lives prior to 2020 versus how we run our lives now is night and day.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say is F3 really helped is put into focus what is important and what's not important,
Sure.
and understanding that maybe the stress and the pressure I was putting on myself at work to do certain things, because in my head it was, if I didn't, it's homeless under a bridge, wife left me, kids won't talk to me, dog died, truck died, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not that. And it making sure that you've got a place where your family is safe, feels safe, and everybody trusts each other, and that is first versus, what, I got this deadline, I'm going to have to sacrifice everything and go get it done, which still happens from time to time. But
Sure.
it definitely put things in focus more than it did before. And where I've really enjoyed the 2.0 stuff. I think one of the highlights of my F3 career so far is my middle son, we did a Boy Scout led 2.0 beat down at Dragon's Lair. And I still get emotional thinking about it. We had 70 some people there with kids. And I mean, they planned the workout. They led most of it. I mean, it was just, I was incredibly proud of these kids, and they were fourth graders at the time. So I really, really it gives me something to do with them that they really enjoy. Now, my oldest son, he's 12 now, and he doesn't like getting up early, and he doesn't want to go work out. But my middle son still loves it, and I've still got a little one who's 7 that he likes to get out too. So I've really, really enjoyed that part. And as far as my M goes, it definitely has changed how we communicate. And what I would say is it's made me more aware of those moments when I'm feeling stress versus not stress, whereas before it was hard to kind of tell what was going on. It has definitely helped in that sense, in approaching things differently and thinking about things differently, for sure.
Interesting. What do you think their perception of F3 is? You're having your 2.0s.
At this point, it's probably I do it too much is probably a thing. It's pretty easy for that to get out of balance. But and honestly, I think maybe they're a little tired of hearing about it because that's pretty much all I talk about a lot. But I'm gonna. It's been positive. I mean, my wife was after me before I got into it. I mean, it was like, hey, you really need to find something to focus your energy on. And now that's transitioned to, okay, you've gotten established in F3. What's that next thing? I'm like, I'm pretty good right here. I'm just going to focus right here for now.
Yeah.
But my kid, like I said, it's for my kids. It's something that's fun. I'll come home from working out and the kids will be in the living room and they'll be like, hey, how was F3? Like it was, it sucked, but it was fun,
Yeah.
So it's been, from my standpoint, we talked about Brad Pitt and that consistency that I saw out of him growing up. They may not be directly involved. They may not have any interest in it, but my hope is that as they get older, they can see that, you know what, this was a change that dad made. This was a commitment he made. And regardless of what was going on, this is what he did in the mornings. And so that I'm hoping that sets in, but it'll be a while before we see if that actually worked or not.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned, well, first of all, T-claps to you for organizing the Boy Scout troop to lead. I think that's really cool, just to identify, hey, there's an opportunity, let's put it together. I think that was really cool. I am curious, when you think about, you mentioned sort of sometimes it's hard to keep sort of those rhythms, aligned, right, between family and F3. And how have you sort of managed those conflicts or that tension when it comes up? Any advice there?
I will say this. I'm very fortunate. My M is very accommodating in that sense. And there really hasn't been anything that's come up where it's like, you know what, you're giving this way too much. Like I need more. But that being said, if there is a direct conflict between F3 and home, F3 is the first one that gets cut out and home wins.
Yep.
It's like if she's got to be somewhere or, she manages people in like 4 other states. And so she has her annual kind of review tour coming up. So she's going to be gone for half the month of December doing that. And the odds of me getting out during that time is probably going to be slim to none, but it's just what it is. She's willing to accommodate me in the morning. And so when the time comes, I got to accommodate her. And but again, she's been super accommodating with her, super, she's what's the word I'm looking for? She's empathetic to a fault is what I would say. So
okay.
She's definitely knows that it's something that I need and want. And so she does everything she can to support that. And then when the opportunities come up where she needs my support, I do everything I can to help her out too.
Yeah. I love it. That's cool. And as long as her opportunities are in the colder months, then it's not so hard to
skipping a week in the middle of December doesn't suck. So.
Right. Yeah. When our daughter was born in November 2 years ago, I was like, this isn't so bad.
No, not too bad. It's not too bad.
Major Team Mortgage at Exarban Mortgage, specializing in home purchase and refinance home loans. Their mission is to purposely empower people to experience their good life through building wealth with real estate. Fellas, showing up in the gloom is no different than showing up for conversation around your future of building wealth with real estate. Join the action economy and get in the game with Sasquatch. Text or call John at 402-212-0149 to schedule a time today. NMLS number 1392750, equal housing lender. I am curious, sort of looking at all these things, right? You got fitness fellowship and then you got the faith piece. And I am curious just what's been your faith journey? Maybe how has F3 helped? And I would love at some point just to hear your perspective on the Impact Retreat.
Yeah. So I would say, I am a Christian. I believe in God, but I'm not an active churchgoer. That's just not, I grew up in small town Nebraska, and my experience with church wasn't always as altruistic as they make it out to be.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I do feel I will say that participating in, if you look at a lot of the stuff that F3 does, has never really been on my radar until I started. And now paying attention to what those things are and thinking of ways that I can give back. It's just something I've never done up until now. And so, I will say, and the stuff that I would have gotten involved with before, pretty much the solution was just throw money at it, but now we have opportunities to spend time to enter, like to actually do something. And you get a lot, I will say, you get a lot more personal fulfillment when you're physically doing things versus just writing checks. I mean,
Yeah.
you just are. Granted, money's great. People need money. It'll help, but it's just, it hits different on the inside when you actually do that. So, um, the thing we've got going right now is my wife organizes this thing called Trees of Love. She talks to nursing homes around the community, people that don't have any family. She'll get their names and put together a list. I'm actually was looking at the list before this call because it just came out. They want a pair of socks. Somebody wants a chapstick holder. These are just little things. And she's done this for the last 10 years. And so it's being able to kind of take that, even though it's not my idea, take that. And I've brought it to F3. And so every year we've had, I think first year I brought it up, we had 2 people participate. Last year, I think we had 7 or 8. And currently I've got 12 names that I got to get people to. So helping with that piece of it has been awesome. I have not participated in any of the Heartland Hope stuff just because it always conflicts with games and sports, but that is something I want to get my kids to. It's just, I will say that it has made me more aware of the fact of the physical act of it versus just the money side, how much more fulfilling it is. So that's been, good.
Hey, while you're at it, send me a couple names.
I will do that.
Would love that. What I will say is like we're in this season of life, right, with a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old where it's chaos. And so for me, like who was it? Vlasic the other day showed up, had boxes for Operation Christmas Child. Yes. I'm like, perfect, sign me up. I can do that, because we're sort of in this season where like, okay, most of it's writing checks, but when stuff like this comes up, it's really cool to be able to see all these guys involved.
I mean, you see what Vandalay does, you see what Thor does, you see what Vlasic does. And so like, when I called you the other night on that Kids Against Hunger thing, it's just like, it's just every once in a while you get that thing and it just kind of hits you hard. And it's like, all right, what can I do here? And so if, we can get exposure to this guy and bring people in to help with this, then yeah, let's do it. And honestly, that would be the first one that, I would have ever like helped organize or got set up. So it's, I don't know, I'm excited about that one. So hopefully we can pull it off here.
Hey, share a little bit about that for guys listening, because by the time this airs, we'll probably be launching something for it. So.
So it's a gentleman that I met when my boys were selling popcorn. It's an organization called Kids Against Hunger. And from what I understand, they accept donations. They use those donations to buy food. And now the food consists of like beans and rice, grains, and they come in and they have all these tables set up, and you'll take this bag. It's probably a quart-sized bag would be my guess. And you take just a cup of things and you put them in the bag, you weigh the bag. It has to be within a certain amount. You put it in a box, and then that box is sealed, and then it's shipped off to, developing countries that need help. And so when I went to deliver the popcorn that this guy bought. He had me meet him at Kings of Kings, and I walked in. This was I think it was a Wednesday. There were probably 200 to 300 people in this church that had I missed the main part of it when they were filling the bags, but they had just gotten done. And I want to say they filled something like 1,000 boxes worth of food, and each box would have, say, 20 bags in it. So it's super impactful. Now, what I don't know is I don't know where the food goes. Like, I don't know specifically who it goes to support. But what I do know is it actually has to be inspected by some government entity before it is shipped out. So it is, it's not just Bob mailing Cheetos across the ocean. It's some organization that it's doing something. And so we're at this point, I need to get him introduced to some of our third F leaders, talk logistics, because the one thing he mentioned, because I asked him, how often do you do this? And the response I got back was, well, it depends on donations. So I don't know how much money they need. I don't know how often they go. They have a facility off of 180th and Q, which is perfect for the West sector. It's kind of heart of everything. So yeah, if we can get some guys wrapped around it to either, donate some money or help fill bags, and you can use your kids too. So I think you can get, 10, 12-year-old kids in there. It works great. So
yeah, I love it. And maybe, I'm excited to see what happens with that. Maybe we do collect donations for couple months, and then center around an event at some point to do the packaging or whatever that looks like. But
Sure.
that was awesome. You just called me, and I could tell you were jazzed.
I was pretty jazzed. So the other thing too is I'm a pretty impulsive guy, and so like a lot of me is like I just get it out and then it sticks, and then I need people to kind of pull me back a little bit because I won't get moving too fast, and sometimes it ain't the best idea. But in this one, I think I definitely have some legs. Definitely have some legs.
Well, helping others is not necessarily a bad thing to be impulsive about, right? No. I think that's good. Well, tell me a little bit about then on the sort of more spiritual faith side and the impact retreat. What was your experience there?
Yeah, so I will tell you this: the one I spent, I'm going to give a shout out to my man Jeeves. So when we were organizing this, when I signed up for it, I had no idea what to expect. Like I said, I am a Christian, but I'm not a super spiritual guy. I'm not an avid churchgoer. And so when I heard this, I think my comment is like, well, nothing I've done, like I said, back to that adage, nothing I've done with F3 so far has been bad. Nothing that I've gotten out of it has been negative, regardless of what I've done. So let's give it a shot and see what happens. And so as we were organizing, like I texted a bunch of guys, and Jeeves, I think, reached out to a bunch of people, said, if anyone wants to ride together, I'll drive, which after the fact, don't drive in Jeeves' car. And I'd tell Jeeves that too. But so we're getting stuff organized, and I send this text back out to everybody. And I think 3 or 4 of the guys were already peeled off doing their own thing. And that just left me and Jeeves left over. And then he asked if I would drive. And I said, sure, I'll drive. Never really talked to the guy, met him before. So I show up and I pick him up from his apartment, which was an ordeal in itself. It was a riot. But what I got out of that is I got an hour there with him and I got an hour back with him. And just who he is as a person, he's fascinating. And if people like that, I will honest to God say one of the biggest takeaways from that weekend was getting to spend those 2 hours with Jeeves. Nothing against and I've said this in my COTs before a lot, is you are where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. Yeah. And you can call it divine intervention. You can call it God giving you a nudge. Something about that weekend put me and Jeeves together and put us in that car together for 2 hours. So I will say that was, and it's still a relationship today. He's had a lot of struggles in his life, and getting to hear his story and seeing where he is today. The guy's a survivor, and I think a survivor more than people would give him credit for. And to see what he's doing now, given everything he's gone through, I mean, it's a pretty impressive thing. So specific to the retreat itself, it definitely spiritually took me to a place that I don't go very often. It forced me to talk about things that I don't talk about very often, think about things I don't talk very often. And, I still, the letter you wrote me is still up on my wall in my bedroom, and I think you wrote me one, Frosty wrote me one. Brad Pitt wrote me one. At that point with where I was at in life and with work and F3 and all of it, like the fact that people would just take time to write something like that, that was the most profound thing at that time. And again, it's a lot of guys. I know we have a bunch of packs that tend to stay away from the Q source because they feel like it gets a little, I don't know why, but they just don't like it. And religion is a very, very personal thing. And so a lot of guys are not comfortable expressing that in public. But if you're willing to let yourself go there, even if it just to experience it, the impact it has as you carry it out of there is very profound. I mean, FDIC did a guided prayer thing while we were there, super impactful. And just to let yourself calm and think and reflect without all of the stuff. It's hard to explain, because unless you go through it, it's really hard to explain. And you want to see 50 grown ass men bawl their eyes out. Yeah. Have a bunch of people who love them write them letters and tell them how much they love them. And they will be these just grown ass man tears for an hour. Yeah. And like I said, some people are turned off by that, but if you would let yourself get there, the impact it has on you, it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah. Well, you went the first year, and then I went last year, and really similar takeaways. Other than I didn't get the opportunity to ride with Jeeves, but just the value of like you said, telling people you love how you feel, and taking time to write it out, I think was huge. And then also just the impact of setting aside some time, time away, quiet time, reflect, evaluate, and really, especially that time of year, right? Going into the new year, and just was huge.
So the small group I was in the cabin with Fish Oil, Thor, Sasquatch, myself, and FDIC. I think it was those group. And I remember first day we're there, FDIC asked me why we're there, and asked us all why we're there. And we're going around the room, and they get to me, and I said, "Well, I'll be straight up with you. I didn't come here to find Jesus." That was a direct comment that I made, because it was just like, "Look, man, it just at that point, I think the walls were up a little bit. By the time we got to the third day, like I wouldn't necessarily say I was still there to find Jesus. I'd found Jesus, but I was willing to accept and understand a lot more than initially when I got there that first day. And again, that's some of that impulsivity that I deal with every day, where the wall comes up. It's like, listen, motherfucker, I ain't going to do this. That kind of thing. But if you allow yourself to just maybe slow down, breathe, and think, you realize, all right, that was a bit extreme, and that's not what this is about. It's really about you deciding where you want to be in this journey and what you want to let in and how much you want to let out. And that was I will remember that. And I still to this day, go up to FDIC. I'm like, I ain't here to find Jesus, bro. It's kind of fun.
I love it. Where do you think that sort of impulsivity or sort of drive comes from? Any idea?
I don't know. It's something I've been dealing with my whole life. I don't have any idea. It's this initial kind of gut reaction to a situation. And in some cases it served me well, in others it has not. And I would say that, you get to a point in life, especially when you start having kids and you get married and you maybe climb the corporate ladder a little bit. You can get away with it when you're younger. As you get a little bit older, you got to temper that a little bit. And I still struggle with that every single day, straight up. There was at the leadership meeting Saturday, Gator, I'll maybe blow him up here a little bit, but he was sitting next to me, and he used to chew tobacco as well. And he showed me that he'd quit tobacco and he'd switched to those nicotine packets. And my initial reaction, and he was chewing the 8, so he's still on the diesel. So he's still got a lot of shit putting in his body. But my comment to him was like, "Oh yeah, I'm on the 2s." It wasn't, because initially I'm like, "This is awesome. That's so cool. We got something to talk about and relate about." It wasn't like, "Dude, I'm really proud of you. That's fantastic that you've made this step." It was like, "Oh yeah, well, I'm at the 2s. You need to get down there." And so it's situations that I'm still struggling with. You know what I mean? It's like I had this opportunity to support this guy and lift him up and tell him how great of a job he is. And instead I'm like, "Yeah, call me when you get down to the 2s. Then we can talk."
Right.
Yeah.
Get on my level, bro. Yeah.
It's kind of that. It's kind of that.
I love it.
So,
that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing that experience, and I think Impact Retreat. Hopefully, guys that go, I'm sure we'll have a bunch of new guys with good stories.
If anybody does listen to this, that's my number one thing. Is if you're afraid of it, you're going to miss out. And again, is there what have you done with this organization that you've left something thinking that was a bad idea, or I didn't get something out of it, or I wished I wouldn't have done that? In 3 years, that has never happened. Even regardless of the workout, what was talked about, who was there, all that stuff. I've never left one of these. And that Impact Retreat, same thing. Yeah, it's going to get touchy feely and it gets a little weird, but if you can just allow yourself to experience it, you're going to grow tremendously.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. Hey, as we're looking at the mission, right? So, trying to reinvigorate or invigorate male community leadership, right? So some of the ways we do that, VQs and site Qs. I think you were I want to say you were like the earliest identified successor in the history of F3 Omaha site Qs.
That's just because the boss didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, I think he identified you like the day after he got the flag. But tell us what that experience was
Yeah.
like, getting to be the site Q at Wild
Yeah. So
Kingdom.
he actually called me in like April, said, "Hey, you want to
Mm-hmm.
take over site Q?" And I'm like, "You got 6 months left." He goes, "I could quit tomorrow. I don't care." And I said, "Well,
Yeah.
I said, yes, I'd be happy to do it. But like, if you're asking me to take over it now, because at that point I was traveling a ton for work and I was just like, there's just no way I can do it. But yes, I'd be happy to take over in October. And honestly, it was super cool. Like like I said, that was the first site that I posted at in Omaha, and to get it from Mufasa, who led the first workout that I was at. And, he's a guy he does a great job at reaching out to people. And I mean, you got to keep up with him because he moves quick, but it's just
Mm-hmm.
to get the flags from him. And again, that was the first place that I worked out at. Like that, Wild Kingdom just has a special place in my heart more than any other site in Omaha. So
Yeah.
that was super awesome. And I think honestly, that was the first place that Brad Pitt ever worked out at too. So, um,
Nice.
so it was awesome. And I think, and I talked a little bit about this when I passed the flags to Sweet Sweet. It was, when I came into it in my head, I had these visions of that it was going to be like it was when I started in 21, where you had wait time, you had Roadhouse, you had Barn Door, you had cheap seats, you had all the mainstays. At that point, I'm thinking Crab Cakes was there quite a bit. Thomas was coming all the time. I mean, it's just all these people that I associated with when I started. And I remember the first couple weeks, like none of them came anymore. Cause at that point, I think Whetstone had started, I think a couple months before, and it pulled a lot of those guys away. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
which was, I mean, again, that's the point. But mentally, when you take this flag, you're like, and straight up, there was ego on my side. Because I'm like, yeah, I
Yeah.
made it. I'm the Psych Cube, blah, blah, blah. And it's going to be so awesome. And then you're just kind of like, okay, I got to readjust. Well,
Yeah,
what
for
happened
sure.
was I mean, the site flipped over, and which is what you want to have happen. So you have guys like Hi Hat and Sweet Sweet and Tumbleweed's been coming a lot. How these guys that from basically when I took it in 22 to when I just gave it up this year, it's just a whole new cast of characters, and you get these regulars, Hunger Man. I mean, all these guys they are now the people that are coming in now. Those are the people they know that versus the people I had when I started. So
Yeah.
in that first year, I think we got through January, and I did kind of a themed couple months where I
Yeah.
think we had a Redwood month, we had a Respect month, we had a Hate month, and that was just to try and I think get people that didn't regularly. And I tried to focus on guys that didn't regularly come. So guys like Patton, wait time had kind of backed off at that point. Chicklets, I mean, he had never been to Wild Kingdom, and I think he's
Hmm.
been out there half a dozen times now. And then let's see, Ozark was there, and I want to say, did we have? I think we maybe had Vlasic and Lincoln Logs at some point, and then the Hate guys. So we had Baby Shoes, and we had Urkel, and we had Taxman, and I had Patchy Adams. So three
Hmm.
out of those four are all site cues now.
Yeah.
And then that's what it was. Yeah, the Redwoods. We had some other guys come in. So that like getting to hear their story and get them to kind of communicate, that was super cool. Now the thing I realized from that is I was scheduled out 12 weeks. And so getting VQs and getting guys that say, hey, can I post, and or getting, some diversity and getting new guys in, that all went out the window. And so
Right.
after we kind of got through that, I think a couple guys were asking, hey, what's your next theme? And I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. Because at that point it was, I transitioned from that to just focusing on, all right, who can I target who hasn't, maybe not the VQs, but who hasn't queued a lot, who's only done a couple times, who hasn't been here, and then, would reach out to them and ask them if they wanted to lead. So that's kind of
Yeah.
how I handled it from there.
I thought the theme months were great. I don't know if you did it differently. Would you do like a VQ month in between there or something?
Yeah, I
Or
thought about that, but getting 4 VQs lined up in a row, I mean, yes, if somebody could get that pulled off, that would be awesome. And it was in
yeah.
my head, but at that point, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So,
Hmm.
because you only have
Yeah.
so many, and if some of the VQ or some of the FNGs, if they've never posted at Wild Kingdom, pulling them over to that site to do their VQ can be a little tough. So, yes, if
Yeah.
somebody out there that's a site Q now wants to try and pull off a VQ month, that would be pretty awesome. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah.
I think that'd be cool.
I love it. I think it's been cool and sweet. I know you told the story during the shovel pass, but talk us through the
Yeah, I mean,
selecting him.
he came to this group just through the worst circumstances ever. I mean, his first post was that memorial post right after Nugent was killed, and it's and he's a leadership. He's a leader by under protest is what it is. Like
Mm,
he's been in Sparty's a bully. He is, and he's pushed it.
yeah.
But it's here's the thing: is it's like every time you ask him to do stuff, he'll never say no. Now he won't
Mhm.
necessarily raise his hand for it because he's like, I don't think I'm good enough for that, or I don't know why I want to do that. But when he does it, like I still remember that silent auction thing we had at MCL's office here last fall, and he had to speak in front of 200 people. And dude, the guy just commands attention when he talks, and he comes across as this super quiet, reserved guy, which he is. But you get him going, and he won't stop. Like he'll just talk
Mhm.
forever. Um, but we had lunch about a couple weeks before the flag pass, and he was kind of sharing all this that these people ask him to do all this stuff with Chris, and I'm like, why would you ever say no? And he kind of stopped, and like he had never thought in his mind that saying no to something was even a possibility. And I'm like, and again, no, you do you, but why wouldn't you say no if it gets to be too much? And his
Mhm.
comment was because Chris would do it for me. And it was
Mm,
like, I mean, at that point, it's like, all right, this guy's just, I mean, he's destined for the moon. I mean,
yeah.
it's just he's not a lead from the front guy, but as far as impactful as he is from leading from the back, like people just follow him. So yeah, he
Yeah.
was in, and I tagged him early. I think I had him picked in like June or July, I think is when I asked him. Because yeah, he's and he lives close by to the site too, and so yeah, he's gonna do great. He's gonna do really great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it was really cool to be at the shovel pass, and I think, yeah, to your point, right? We've got all of these men leading, but we all lead in a little bit different way, and so I think it's cool to just see, whatever he decides to do with the site, or however the packs that are showing up there kind of morph it into what it needs to be.
Yeah,
It's just cool to see.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
great.
I'm curious, as we're kind of coming to a close here, just is there anything that you would want to share with guys that we haven't covered? Maybe it's advice or words of wisdom or things that guys got to make sure they're getting plugged into. Anything that comes to mind there?
Not really. The one thing I would say is the shield lock for me has been really impactful, and I would say we've stumbled with what it should be and how it needs to run, but I think it's I think that for us has been part of the good part of it is that it necessarily hasn't gone exactly how we want it to, but at the same
Mm,
time, it's forced us to address that and recommit, make changes, do those types of things. So that's been good. So if you have those guys that are out there that you're pre-rucking with, pre-running with, taking it one step further into that shield lock space, if and it's got to make sense. You can't force it. If you try and force it, it's not going to have any value to it.
right.
But if you can get that established, it really is good because it's everybody is super forthcoming and humble and vulnerable when you're out there, and most everybody will talk to you about anything. But to kind of have that next level where you can really go to these guys with something you're really struggling with, not that you couldn't talk to about it with other people, but you just get a better picture into what their lives are and what they're dealing with more than just in the mornings. um,
Yeah.
it can be really impactful. So don't shy away from that. If you have that opportunity and you have those guys in your corner, think about doing it.
Heck yeah, yeah. And the Q source topic on shield lock, I think, is pretty good as far as structure. You got the three P's or four P's, right?
Yeah, it's been a while since I read it. I think it's
But
something like that. Yeah.
yeah, awesome, man. Hey, last question for you, sort of just as you're thinking about life currently, where do you need support or prayers or encouragement when we see it out there? Anything we could be checking in on you with?
Right now, I think we're okay. I mean, I think professionally, like I said, last 2 or 3 years professionally have just been kind of gray. Like nothing's negative, but you get to that point professionally where, maybe the rise isn't what it used to be. You start to maybe plateau. And so it's balancing, I think it's maybe expectation without. It's that balance between settling and or becoming complacent with but finding value in what different ways to find value in what you're doing. Does that make sense? Whereas, when you're young and you're aggressive, you get promotions, you get new titles, you get more responsibility. It's easy to measure what value you add. And even as a dad, your kids get older, they don't need you as much. And the types of, my oldest son is 12 and he doesn't need me like he used to. And I saw on Facebook, one of the Facebook memories popped up this morning from 7 years ago, and him and his little brother were dancing to the hand clap song in our living room, barely higher than my knee. And so you start to think about that, and you go through this phase of your life where it's very easy to determine where am I adding value and what my responsibilities are. And as you get older, that changes. They call it the midlife crisis, if you will, but I'm in that transition period where what defined success and value previous to now to what it is now in the next 10 years. That's what I'm in the middle of right now.
Absolutely, man. Definitely be thinking about you there. It is interesting too. I think as we get, as we sort of right size our relationship with like work versus family and, I'm a similar feeling as you where it's like, is it okay that I don't care as much about work? Like, I think so.
It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird to feel that way, but you're right.
It's so countercultural too, I think is the other piece because it's definitely not the norm.
Yeah.
But well, man, this has been great, and just appreciate you and who you are, the way you lead, the way you impact the men around you, the way you impact your family. It's just you've definitely impacted me. So I just want to say thank you for your time today, and just for being you when you're out there.
Well, likewise, man. I'm glad this is pretty awesome. You do this with everybody, so I appreciate you giving us the forum.
Yeah, it's a highlight of my day. So we'll do a little name-a-rama here. Sure. Brandon Flaherty, 37, The Plague.
Kellen Petersen, 41, Ketchup.
It's I can't do it.
It is what it is. It could be whatever you want it to be.
Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, buddy.